The courtroom was eerily silent, save for the rhythmic tapping of the gavel. Anna stood motionless, her heart pounding in her chest. The weight of the case felt heavier than ever, and yet she was determined to win. The eyes of the room were all on her, waiting for her to speak. She could feel their judgment, the expectations. She had worked tirelessly to build her case, to ensure every detail was perfect. But deep down, a nagging feeling lingered, something she couldn't shake. Was she doing this for justice, or had the power of the law seduced her into a different kind of truth? "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady but her mind racing. "We have the evidence to prove that the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt." The judge's gavel echoed once more. The room held its breath. Anna's gaze shifted briefly to the defendant, a man she had once believed to be innocent. The truth was slipping through her fingers, just as the case seemed to be slipping away from her grasp. The words left Anna's mouth before she could stop them, the weight of the truth carrying more than she had anticipated. "Guilty," she whispered to herself, though no one in the courtroom heard it. As her own words echoed in her mind, she wondered if she truly meant them. Was the evidence enough, or was her ambition clouding her judgment? The trial was not just about the law. It was about who she was becoming. She thought of her family, the sacrifices they'd made so she could stand here. But unease tightened around her like a vice. Her mentor's warnings replayed in her mind, urging caution, but the hunger for victory was louder. Leaving the courtroom, her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, each step heavier than the last. Alone in the corridor, shadows stretched toward her as if the building itself knew her doubt. She had to win. For her. For them. But at what cost? Anna paused by the courthouse steps. The city sprawled before her under a dull, overcast sky. The muted roar of traffic below seemed distant. She gripped the railing, cold metal biting into her palm. This case was supposed to be her moment, the one to cement her reputation, but doubt clung to her like a shadow she couldn't shake. She thought of the defendant's eyes, that flicker of something unspoken. Was it guilt or desperation? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. In the pit of her stomach she knew something didn't add up, and yet she felt herself leaning into the narrative she had built. It wasn't just the truth on trial anymore. It was her integrity, her career, and the life she had promised herself she would lead. And once she took the next step forward, there would be no turning back. Rain began to fall in thin cold sheets, soaking the courthouse steps. Anna remained motionless, letting the water run down her face. The storm felt like a cleansing she didn't deserve. Her mind replayed the morning's arguments, each word weighed against the silence that followed. A voice behind her broke the rhythm. It was Mark, her co-counsel. "You pushed too hard today," he said, his tone caught between concern and accusation. Anna didn't answer. She was afraid that if she opened her mouth, the truth would pour out, unfiltered. Instead, she turned toward the heavy courthouse doors. The rain was nothing compared to the storm inside her. She could still hear the defendant's slow breathing, still see his stillness as the gavel fell. And she knew this was only the beginning. Inside her small, dimly lit office, Anna sat at her desk, the rain tapping softly against the window. The room smelled faintly of old paper and coffee gone cold. Case files lay scattered before her like fragments of a truth she no longer trusted. She picked up a photograph from the evidence pile, a blurred image of the defendant with a woman whose face was half hidden in shadow. Something about it gnawed at her. The clock on the wall ticked with maddening precision. Every second felt like a warning she refused to acknowledge. She leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on the ceiling, wondering how far she'd go to protect her case. The truth was messy. The truth was dangerous. And she wasn't sure she wanted it anymore. Anna sat in the conference room, the blinds drawn tight against the fading light. The air was heavy with stale coffee and unspoken tension. Across the table, Mark flipped through the case files with a deliberate slowness. "You're pushing this too far," he said, without looking up. Anna's jaw tightened, her fingers drumming lightly on the table. She thought about the missing witness, the shifting testimonies, and the growing hole in her narrative. The truth was slipping further from reach, yet she clung to the image of victory. "We can't afford to back down now," she replied, her tone steady but her heart unsteady. Outside, a siren wailed faintly, reminding her how close chaos always lingered. She wasn't sure if she was chasing justice anymore, or running from the truth. Later that night, Anna stood at her apartment window, staring out at the rain-slick streets below. Her reflection looked older, worn down by weeks of relentless pressure. She sipped from a glass of wine, letting the bitterness linger on her tongue. The city lights blurred into streaks against the glass as she thought of the choices she had made. She remembered her mentor's words, "The law will test you, Anna, but don't let it own you." Yet here she was, feeling owned by the very case she thought she controlled. Somewhere out there the truth waited, but it was buried under layers of lies, ambition, and fear. And she was the one who helped put it there. The next morning, the courthouse lobby buzzed with the low hum of voices and footsteps on marble. Anna entered, her heels clicking sharply, her face a mask of calm. In her bag lay documents she wasn't supposed to have, papers that could make or break the case. As she approached the security checkpoint, her pulse quickened. She smiled faintly at the guard, masking the storm within. She knew every step was a gamble now. The ethical lines she once clung to had faded, replaced by a gray fog of survival. This wasn't about the right thing anymore, it was about winning. And she wasn't going to lose. Not now. D-Main. Inside the courtroom, the tension was suffocating. The judge entered, and everyone rose. Anna's gaze darted to the defense table, empty. The missing witness had struck again, and whispers rippled through the room. Mark leaned toward her. "We're losing control," he muttered under his breath. Anna didn't answer. Her mind was racing through contingency plans, each more desperate than the last. She could feel the jury's eyes, the weight of their expectations. If she faltered now, everything would unravel. She straightened her papers, her hands steady despite the chaos inside. The show had to go on, even if it meant crossing a line she could never uncross. By evening, Anna found herself in a quiet cafe, far from the courthouse. She sat in the corner booth, nursing a black coffee, staring at her notes. The chatter around her was distant, like another world she no longer belonged to. She thought about calling her mother, but what would she say? That she was in too deep? That the truth had become an inconvenience? Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number, "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." She stared at the screen, the words burning into her mind. The choice before her was clear: walk away now, or keep going and risk everything. She closed her eyes, knowing which path she'd choose. The late afternoon sun filtered through the dusty blinds of Anna's office, casting thin golden lines across her desk. She stared at the new evidence file, its corners worn, its contents dangerous. Mark had dropped it off without explanation, his eyes saying more than his words ever could. "You need to see this," he had murmured, leaving before she could ask questions. Anna's fingers hovered over the clasp before finally flipping it open. The first page made her stomach drop, a signed affidavit that contradicted her entire argument. Her mind raced, weighing the choice between burying it or blowing the case wide open. Every instinct told her this was a line she couldn't uncross. And yet, the longer she stared, the more she knew her next step would define everything. That night, Anna met her estranged brother in a dimly lit parking garage. He emerged from the shadows, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes scanning the area. "You're chasing the wrong truth," he said quietly. She froze. He hadn't spoken to her in years. He handed her a flash drive, its weight feeling heavier than metal should. "This will change everything. But once you see it, you can't pretend you didn't." Her pulse hammered as she slipped it into her pocket. Questions piled in her mind, but his expression made clear there would be no answers tonight. She watched him disappear into the dark, the echo of his footsteps fading into silence. Back in her apartment, Anna sat at her desk with the flash drive plugged into her laptop. The screen glowed in the otherwise dark room, illuminating her face. One by one, Video files played, grainy security footage, whispered phone calls, documents stamped confidential. Her chest tightened with each revelation. The case wasn't just flawed. It was built on lies, and not all of them belonged to the defense. Her own team was implicated. She leaned back, rubbing her temples, the weight of the truth pressing down like a vice. The urge to destroy the drive battled against the duty to act. The following morning, Anna confronted Mark in his office. He stood by the window, back to her, sunlight framing his silhouette. "How long have you known?" she demanded. He didn't turn. "Long enough to know the truth won't save us." The air thickened between them, each word a spark. Anna stepped closer, anger rising. "You put me in this position. You lied to me." He finally turned, his face calm but his eyes heavy. "I protected you. You just can't see it yet." She realized then that betrayal didn't always come from enemies. That evening in court, Anna watched as the defense produced evidence she had seen on the flash drive. The jury's heads turned, whispers spreading like wildfire. Her stomach dropped, realizing they had beaten her to it. The judge called for order, but the room buzzed with the shift in power. Mark's face was unreadable beside her. The truth was now public, but it wasn't hers to tell anymore. She sat frozen, the echo of her brother's warning ringing in her ears. This was the moment the case slipped beyond her control, and there was no pulling it back. The courthouse felt colder that morning, its marble walls echoing each hurried footstep. Anna entered the courtroom, carrying a folder heavier in implication than in paper. Every pair of eyes followed her as she took her seat. Across the aisle, the defense attorney smirked, confident from yesterday's blow. Mark leaned toward her, voice low. "We still have a shot, but you'll need to take a risk." She glanced at the jury, their expressions unreadable, and felt the enormity of the gamble. The truth was no longer an abstract idea. It was a blade, and someone would bleed. She squared her shoulders, knowing hesitation would be fatal now. During recess, Anna stood alone in the courthouse's side corridor, the hum of distant conversation barely reaching her. She replayed Mark's words, the risk they implied. A risk that could cost her the case, or her career. The defense's evidence was damning, but she had something that could turn the tide. The problem was, revealing it would also reveal her own team's betrayal. Her pulse quickened as footsteps approached. It was the court clerk, handing her a note. Just 4 words. "He's willing to talk." Her eyes narrowed. The missing witness was ready. But at what price? In a cramped witness room, Anna sat across from the missing witness, a man in his late 40s with tired eyes and trembling hands. "Why now?" she asked, her voice low. He avoided her gaze. "Because they crossed a line," he said, sliding a sealed envelope toward her. She hesitated before taking it, feeling the weight of its contents without opening it. Every second stretched thin with the knowledge that this could end the trial or destroy her. She met his eyes, and in that moment, knew he was telling the truth. And that terrified her even more. Back in the courtroom, Anna stood, the sealed envelope in her hands. Every instinct screamed at her to be cautious, but the jury's expectant eyes held her steady. She handed it to the bailiff, who delivered it to the judge. As the judge broke the seal and began reading, the room's air seemed to thin. The defense attorney shifted uncomfortably, and a ripple of whispers spread through the gallery. Anna watched, her face composed, but her heart pounding so loud, she feared it might drown out the judge's voice. The judge's voice was calm, but each word struck like a hammer. The evidence was clear. Falsified statements, altered timelines, hidden motives. Gasps broke from the gallery. The defense attorney's smirk was gone. Mark kept his eyes on the table, avoiding Anna's gaze. She felt the ground shift under her, knowing she had just turned the trial into uncharted territory. The cost of this revelation would come later. But for now, the truth had teeth, and it was biting back. The morning's air was thick with anticipation as Anna stepped into the courthouse. Her every movement felt heavy, as though each step took her deeper into a trap she hadn't seen coming. She noticed the subtle shift in the jury's expressions, a faint trace of doubt settling in their eyes. Mark avoided her gaze completely, flipping through his notes with mechanical precision. Something was wrong, and she could feel it in the pit of her stomach. The defense attorney leaned back in his chair, watching her like a predator certain of the kill. The sense of control she once had was gone. She didn't know yet what cards were about to be played, only that they wouldn't be hers. Halfway through the session, the defense called a surprise witness, someone Anna never thought she'd see on that side of the courtroom. Her closest confidant from the firm walked to the stand, avoiding her eyes. Each word from their testimony sliced into her carefully built case, revealing details only an insider would know. The jury leaned forward, hungry for the revelation. Anna's hands curled into fists under the table, nails biting into her palms. This was no accident. It was a betrayal crafted to dismantle her from the inside. The worst part was knowing she had let them close enough to do it. The cross-examination was brutal. Anna stood, her voice steady but her heart in chaos, dismantling her former friend's testimony piece by piece. But every answer they gave twisted the knife deeper, framing Anna as careless, manipulative, even unethical. Whispers rippled through the gallery, and she could feel the jury's sympathy shifting away. She pressed on, refusing to falter, yet knowing the damage was already done. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional suicide, carried out in plain sight. In the hallway afterward, Anna confronted Mark. "You knew," she accused, her voice low but laced with venom. He didn't deny it. "It had to be done," he replied, his tone chilling in its detachment. She stared at him, searching for any trace of the man she had trusted. "Had to be done for who?" she demanded. His silence was the answer. The bond between them shattered, leaving only echo of footsteps as he walked away. That night, Anna sat in her car in an empty parking lot, city lights flickering in the distance. The rain tapped against the windshield in a steady rhythm, masking the quiet tremor of her breath. She replayed every decision, every alliance, every misplaced trust. She had lost control of the narrative and the case. Yet, somewhere in the weight of that realization, a spark remained. Betrayal had taken everything from her, but it had also freed her from the illusion of loyalty. The next move would be hers, and it would be ruthless. The courthouse was quieter than usual that morning, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. Anna walked in, gripping a flash drive like it was the last piece of her sanity. This wasn't just evidence, it was the key to tearing down every lie that had built this case. She could feel eyes on her, the defense sensing something was different. Mark didn't speak, but his glance carried both warning and resignation. Today, the truth would either save her or finish her completely. She slid into her seat, the weight of the flash drive in her pocket, anchoring her to the moment. In the judge chambers, Anna stood across from the bench, the flash drive placed delicately on the desk. "This changes everything," she said, her voice low but steady. The judge's eyes scanned her face, searching for cracks. He gestured for the clerk to take it. As the files opened on the court's computer, a tense silence fell. Image after image appeared. Falsified documents, hidden transactions, and names that shouldn't have been there. Anna's pulse thundered in her ears. Every secret she'd been fighting against was now in plain view. What? When court reconvened, Anna addressed the jury, her voice steady, but carrying the weight of weeks of battles. "You've heard their story. Now you'll see the truth." The projector flickered to life, filling the wall with damning evidence. Murmurs broke out, some jurors exchanging glances, others leaning forward intently. The defense attorney rose in protest, but the judge's gavel silenced him. Anna watched their faces change, disbelief, anger, and realization taking root. Mark finally leaned over to her, his voice a strained whisper. "You've set fire to everything." She didn't look at him. Sometimes that's the only way to see what's left. She kept her eyes on the jury, watching their reactions with precision. The defense sat motionless, their confidence drained away. The gallery buzzed with energy, the shift in momentum palpable. Anna knew this was the turning point, but the fallout would be brutal. By the end of the day, the judge called for an adjournment. the weight of the new evidence still settling over the room. Anna gathered her files slowly, aware that every step now was history in motion. As she walked out, reporters swarmed the hallway, flashes bursting like fireworks. She didn't stop to speak. This wasn't victory yet. It was the point of no return. The truth was now out in the open, and it could not be taken back. The courthouse felt like an arena as the final day of the trial began. The air was thick with tension, every seat occupied, every eye fixed on the figure at the front of the room. Anna walked through the aisles, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor, a sound that echoed in the heavy silence. She moved with purpose, but underneath her heart pounded, every breath conscious. The defense lawyer was already settled at his table, flipping through his notes with a smug, almost mocking smile. His presence was like a reminder of the stakes, how the outcome of this trial could either restore her career or bury it forever. The jury sat, their eyes on her, unreadable. Across from them, the defense sat in their own silence, preparing their counter. The judge's gavel fell, bringing the room to stillness. Anna stood at the prosecution table, her notes neatly stacked in front of her, but none of the words felt like they would be enough. There was no turning back now. Every piece of evidence, every argument had led to this moment. The lies were unraveling, and Anna knew that the truth she had fought so hard to reveal would now be her salvation or her undoing. The gavel rang out once again, signaling the start of the final stretch. Her time had come. As Anna stood before the jury, her voice began to ring clear and unwavering, each word holding the weight of a battle fought in shadows and silence. "You've seen the evidence," she said, her gaze sweeping over the jury members. "You've heard the lies told by the defense. But now you must choose between the truth and the fiction spun by those who think they can control it." The courtroom was still, as if the walls themselves were listening. She paced slowly, allowing the gravity of her words to settle in. The truth was simple, stark, and painful, and yet it was the only thing she could offer them now. "I stand before you not to ask for mercy but for justice, not just for the defendant but for all of us who have been part of this system. The truth doesn't bend to convenience. It does not bow to power. It stands regardless of the cost." As her voice resonated in the room, Anna could feel every eye on her, the jury's gaze shifting from one juror to the next. She could feel their judgment weighing heavily on her, but it wasn't the kind of judgment she feared. This was about right and wrong, and for the first time in weeks, Anna felt certain of her cause. The lies were no longer her burden. It was their turn to decide. The defense rose next, their words calculated, their attacks sharp and vicious. Every accusation against Anna seemed designed to dismantle not just the case but her character. She manipulated the evidence, the defense attorney claimed. She doctored the records to fit her narrative. Anna sat silently, the words cutting through her with the precision of a blade. She didn't react, didn't flinch, but inside, something was breaking. She thought of the years of work, the late nights spent poring over case files, the sacrifices she had made to get to this point. And now, it was all being reduced to a smear. The defense attorney's voice rose in volume, stirring the gallery into whispers. But Anna didn't listen to the noise. She knew that her silence was her strength. This battle was no longer one of words, but of truth. She had shown her cards, and the rest was in the hands of the jury. But as the words continued to fly, she felt a flicker of doubt. Not about the case, but about the world she had been a part of for so long. The hours of deliberation felt like an eternity. Anna waited in silence, the weight of every decision hanging on the edge of the jury's deliberation. The courtroom was nearly empty, except for a few reporters milling about, their quiet chatter a distant hum. The judge's voice broke the stillness. "We are ready for the verdict." Anna stood as the jury entered, her breath catching in her chest. Her heart raced, but she kept her face neutral. The foreperson stood with a small slip of paper, unfolding it with a deliberate motion that stretched the moment painfully thin. The judge asked for the verdict, his voice resonating in the silent room. The foreperson read the words aloud, each syllable echoing in Anna's mind. "Guilty." Her breath left her in a rush, her heart sinking. not in despair but in something more complicated: relief. The truth had won, but it had come at a cost she would carry forever. As the gavel came down, Anna's gaze shifted to the defendant, whose expression was unreadable. The courtroom erupted into murmurs, and Anna stood motionless, feeling the weight of the victory and the price that came with it. The courthouse steps were quieter than usual when Anna left. The air outside was crisp, the weight of the day still clinging to her shoulders. The reporters surrounded her, their questions sharp, their voices eager for a headline. "Do you think justice was served?" one asked. She didn't stop. She didn't answer. She kept walking, her heels clicking against the stone as the last remnants of daylight faded behind her. Anna reached the bottom of the steps, pausing for a moment. The city stretched before her, bathed in the fading glow of sunset. The weight of the trial, and of the secrets it had unearthed, seemed to lift slightly. But the road ahead was unclear. Justice had been served, but there was no easy answer to what came next. For the first time in a long while, Anna wasn't sure what her future held. She took a deep breath, letting the cool evening air fill her lungs. She knew in that moment that whatever came next, she would face it on her terms. She turned toward the crowd, the flashing cameras reflecting off her eyes as she walked into the night, her figure swallowed by the shadows of the city she had fought to protect.